Thank you so much. Thank you to you, Rabbi Magorlis. Thank you to the Institute. Thanks to all of you who have been such excellent journeyers through this time period. And we got a chance Monday night to celebrate all the teachers and this daily sit was really the highlight of this past year for me. When I was able to join, and even when I wasn't able to join, I felt its presence in a way. And I was able to start a weekly sit group here within my own synagogue, which has been just an unbelievable journey. And this group of people and the teachers that came every day really gave me the strength and the courage to make that happen for my own community. And so know that your efforts here have larger impacts than you will ever know in so many ways. So thank you for letting me join you. I'm excited today to share with you a little bit of Torah. It's wonderful to be entering into Shabbat with the words of the Parsha for the week on our lips. And this week, Parsha, in rabbinical school, I always lamented that it came during the summer because it's got to be like the top 3 favorite B'nai Mitzvah Torah portions, because it involves talking animals, So exciting. So Parshat Balak is this week's Torah portion. It includes a nemesis this week. Balak is a king who hears about the success of the Jewish forces sort of roaming through the wilderness and entering these different territories, and he's very nervous. He's fearful, and he calls on Balaam, who's a local priest, a sort of sorcerer of sorts, to come and deal with this group of people by cursing them. Balaam and God have a deep connection, and Balaam tries to tell Balak over and over again that these are people that cannot be cursed, because only people who God has cursed can be cursed. And so, and these are people that continue to be blessed by God, and there's just really nothing he can do about it. Balak is insistent and beckons Balaam to come to him. And so Balaam gets on a donkey and encounters a messenger along the way who Balaam cannot see, but the donkey can. And this is a little bit ancillary to what I want to talk about today, but it's just such a great story. And I couldn't neglect talking about it just for a second. Basically what happens is that 3 different times an angel stands in front of the donkey, preventing the donkey from walking forward. But Balaam can't see it, and so hits the donkey, urging him forward. And finally, the 3rd time this happens, the donkey just lays down. And it says that God enters into this donkey and begins to speak through the donkey, saying, "Why in the world do you keep hitting me? I cannot go anywhere." And finally, God reveals that there's an angel standing in front of the donkey. All of this is to say that really Balaam is getting very strong messages that these are people that cannot be cursed. Nonetheless, Balak insists, and so brings Balaam to the, you imagine almost like a ridge overlooking the camped out, the Israelites who are camped out below. And Balaam opens his mouth to curse the people. Finally, he's right in front of them. All he has to do is say the word. And instead of a curse coming out, these words come out instead. Ma tovu oalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How beautiful, how good, right? Ma tovu, you hear the word tov. How good are these tents, Israel, or Yaakov, these mishkan of Israel. And of course, we know that there is not a word in Torah that is superfluous. And so the rabbis and the mystics and all of us continue to ask, why does it repeat? It would have been enough to just say, Ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, just to stop there. Why does it also add mishkenotecha Yisrael? So why does it say the tents of Jacob? And then in addition, say the dwelling places of Israel. And just to show you, because some of us are visual learners, I know I share that. Here it is in the Torah, thanks to Safaria, Numbers 24, verse 5. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. It's like a repetition, this citing of place and people. Because Yaakov is also Israel. They share the same, it's one person with two names, right? And that's how we are known. The Kiddushat HaLevi comes to say something very interesting about this text. The Kiddushat HaLevi says that Yaakov, whenever the people are referred to as Yaakov, that it marks a moment when the people are at a low ebb of spirituality. Their connection is not terribly deep. They don't feel that sense of God's presence in an immediate way. However, when we hear the word Yisrael, when we hear the people of Israel being called Yisrael, that is a mark that we are at a spiritual high point, that we've found a deep and enduring connection, that we have an ability to truly experience God's presence in our lives, to experience that fulfillment. And he says further that the word ohel, which is tent, implies a kind of impermanence, right? We know that from our own existence, right? If we are out tent camping, for most of us, that's an impermanent experience, right? That's a momentary thing. Whereas a mishkan, a dwelling place, right? A shochen, a place where we dwell, is a permanent place. And so we understand that there's some relationship between an impermanence and a low ebb of spirituality, and a permanence and a more connected, a sort of higher place of spirituality. And I love that. I think there's such power in this notion of really understanding that our spiritual journey is never linear, it's never constant, it's always in flux. And sometimes we feel really connected and we have access to our own inner lives in such an immediate way. And we're able to kind of sail above the chaos of life in a different kind of way in which we can access our own wisdom and have perspective on our lives. And other times that is just not available to us. We feel a little bit of an ebb. It may cause us even to worry. When will I feel connected again? How will I get back? But I think one of the lessons we learn from Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael is to trust that there is an ebb and a flow, just as the waves come up to the shore and leave again, just as the tides come and go, that this is a natural part of the journey, of our spiritual journey. And the other piece that I love of this, two more pieces. Second piece that I love of this is that there is also a sense that we can help foster a connection that happens more often, that we can actually create frameworks for ourselves that allow us into connecting to our deepest selves, connecting to the divine, accessing our own wisdom, finding a sense of calm amid the chaos, by creating permanent practices, by creating times, fixed times when we sit, by working with the ebb and flow of the Jewish calendar that says when it's time to work, go for it. And when it's time to rest, go for it. Don't ever, try as much as we can to really connect to those rhythms, because they have deep wisdom inside them, actually. And setting that time aside in a fixed way allows us more opportunity to work with our spiritual lives, and allows us more often the chance to seamlessly flow into our own access. We all have those days when we are able to drop in and immediately feel the sense of God's presence. And when we have these practices, we, I think, up our likelihood, our odds at connecting more easily. And then the last thing I'll add here is that no matter where we are, at the ebb or at the flow, Ma tovu is always there. How good is this? that goodness is always present, right? The way in which we experience our own goodness, the ways in which we experience goodness flowing from the universe, from the world around us, is always there. And I'm reminded of that beautiful teaching that actually you offered us, Rabbi, of Psalm 23, where it says, Ma tov ach tov b'chesed yirdafenu, right? That we actually are pursued by goodness. It is trying so hard to chase us down. And all we need to do to realize that is just to sit still long enough for it to catch up. And so I see that reflected here as well. This notion that goodness is really just to sit away. And I think that helps us to adapt to this changing world around us that's suddenly demanding things of us that it hadn't just a few months ago. It helps us to encounter the struggles that we see and reassessing what is most meaningful in our lives, as some of us are recalibrating our own maybe work life or family life. It helps us to center justice and truly get to the bottom of what is good, not just for me, but for us and for the broadest scope of us that we can possibly imagine. It helps us to develop the kind of empathy that allows us to be loving partners, parents, colleagues, community members. And so this work of setting ourselves time to practice, trusting in the ebb and flow of our own spiritual lives, and understanding that goodness is just to sit away, is all inspired by this Matovu prayer that we say every morning. And so in our tefillah, but let's play with it right now as we sit. And I'll just ask us as we sit during this time, as we invite in a moment of quiet, find a relaxed stance, feeling supported by the cushion underneath us, feeling supported by maybe the cushions behind us, feeling the ebb and flow of the ways our bodies play with gravity in this moment, both grounded and connected to the earth and also reaching Shemaima towards the heavens. And you might consider closing your eyes or blurring your vision just slightly such that you begin to notice the breath, which, like goodness, is always there, humming along underneath our lives. And yet in our sit, in our moment of quietness, we're able to appreciate and understand it. To recognize and acknowledge the goodness that is the miracle of breath. And as we sit today, I'll invite us to just begin to witness and observe the goings-on of the mind and the heart. And whether you're sitting today in the glorious sun of summer, in the drizzle of the rain, in the height of spiritual connection, or in the ebb, to take this time to connect to your goodness. And even when we may trip up, mess up, or we watch others around us fumble, may we be able to see as well that most all of us really just want goodness for ourselves and for each other. And so I invite us all to cultivate a sense of goodness, that you are good, that we are good, we humans. Because that's how we were built. And no amount of urging others to curse us will change that fact. It's unavoidable, this goodness inside. And so we'll sit for the next 10 minutes in goodness. As we wrap up today, may you know goodness through the ebbs and through the flows. May you know goodness even when it feels hidden or unavailable. May goodness pursue you and catch up with you often. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Lydia, for that gorgeous teaching, application of Ma Tovu. Thank you so much. Looking forward to immersing in that teaching a little bit more in a few minutes. For those who are able and interested to stay on for a conversation with Rabbi Lydia Medwin. And for those of you who are leaving, of course, we'll wish you Shabbat Shalom, but we seal our practices as our custom with Kaddish. Invite those of you who are in mourning, observing a yard site, if you're holding grief in your heart, to rise in body or in spirit. Please join me. Yitkadal, Yikadash Shemei Rabbah,
Amen.
Yama Divra Chirute, Yalich Malkute, V'chayechon, U'yamechon, U'chayechon, Israel, Agala, Vizman Karim,
Amen.
Yehesh
Shmei Rabba
Barak,
Olam
Olam
Olamaya.
Yitbarach,
Yitbarach,
V'Yitar, V'Yitramam, V'Yitaseh, V'Yitadar, V'Yitaleh, Oshemei, V'Kudashah, Bari, Kuru, Min Kol Birchata, V'Shirata, Tushbata, V'Negalata, Damiran, V'Alman, V'Aru, Amen. Hesh Mama Rabba, Min Shemaya, V'Chaim Aleinu, V'Yokol Yisrael, V'Baruch, Amen. Oseh Shalom, V'Mamavu, Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'Yokol Yisrael,
Aleinu v'yakol Yisrael, Hakol Yoshvei Tevel, Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Blessings of comfort to those of you who are mourning or observing yard sites. Thanks to Adi Stein, as always, for holding us through a week of practice with skill and grace. Thanks to all of you for just being here and committing to this, being so devoted to this engagement and practice over time, this permanence, as Rabbi Lydia was alluding to, this this mishkan, this ohel of practice that we have created together, which is so precious and so good. So thanks for being part of that. And I wish you all Shabbat Shalom. May it be a restorative Shabbat, whether you run into talking animals or not along your path. Whatever obstacles you may meet, meeting it with the same spirit of goodness that we were cultivating today. And hope to see you on Monday. We have a wonderful schedule of teachers for next week. So we hope you'll join us again on Monday. Of course, yoga on Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and back here for meditation at 12:30 Eastern as well. Shabbat Shalom to those who are leaving. And if you have a question you'd like to put to Rabbi Lydia Medwin, please put it in the chat box. And Lydia, thank you so much. That was just beautiful, beautiful. It was a beautiful teaching, and it was a beautiful induction into experiencing the teaching in the form of meditation practice. So thank you so much for that. It was really beautiful. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I get a little nervous about putting the teachers on the spot, but if you are willing to play the game for a little bit, I want to invite you, and I'm going to give you a little warning here. What I want to invite you to do is engage your liturgist rabbinic self, and think about, because I'm interested, like someone put in the chat box, thanks for a very spiritual and practical teaching. And this is a very practical teaching because Ma Tovu, of course, is a piece of liturgy that a lot of, I don't know about most, probably many people are familiar with. It's sung. It's one of those pieces of liturgy that people may not think much about. They just may like the melody, or they, oh, I know this, but not necessarily use it as a moment for spiritual practice about, oh, this is a reminder for me to think about and, come closer to something that's going on internally for me right now. So here's the question. The question is, if you had complete freedom to do an interpretive translation of Matovu for a Siddur, that people would see the English and say, oh, yes. I mean, I haven't, I think having heard your teaching and based on the Kedushat Levi, the Hasidic take on this, having some idea, but I wonder if you could offer that, is that putting you too much on the spot?
No.
No, like how would you, as a covenant, you're offering a covenant to your congregation about this, like, here's the English, if you want to really know what this means.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a good question. And true rabbinic style, each word means so much to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's going to be a little bit of a rambling translation.
Tell you what, I'm gonna make this a collective project for everybody who's still here. 167 people still here. You heard the teaching. So how will you translate that passage for yourself? You can put that in the chat box. What is what's your translation of Matovu, which is essentially just a recap and reiterate the teaching. What I heard was, there is goodness. We could, here's my hot take here is, there's goodness through the ebbs and flows of life, through the downs and the heights, through the fleeting and the permanent. Goodness is present through that. So that, I don't know if I'm taking it off the hook, but maybe you got another one.
Yeah, you took me off the hook there, but it was beautifully done. I'm glad that came through. I think there's also, I love sentences that start with a question word, like, is it a question? Mm-hmm. And, like a curiosity cultivation moment. Mm-hmm. What is good? What is good right now? And yet an exclamation, like, wow, this is so good. And the dynamic between permanence and impermanence is always something that is, so fascinating as humans to play with, because it is, it's the nature of life, and yet, like, the part of life, the finitude of life is something that stumps us often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Love that.
Right. And so, so what is permanent about goodness? I just think there's a lot to play with there. There's probably a few different ways to interpret this. I'm loving what I see in the chat.
So great. Great. Keep them coming, folks.
You're good even when you're not your best self. I just think that's so great. I read a beautiful story this morning about one of my teachers. Some of you may know him. His name is Larry Dressler. He's not a rabbi, but he is Jewish. He shared a story that he'd heard about a chicken. And he says, chickens are very busy. They're constantly scratching and whatever. But what we care about is their egg laying ability, usually. Those of us who might have like backyard chicken flocks. But chickens don't always lay eggs. Like when they get older, they lay fewer eggs. If they're molting, they don't lay eggs. If it's cold out, it's like they're saving their energy. And so are they less chickeny? Like if they don't produce something, and if they're not their best chicken selves. So I think there's like, we're good because we exist. And that's actually, I think, part of our intrinsic nature. And I think that's what our Jewish spiritual teachings are often referring to, right? When we don't find our best selves, it's often because we got mucked up, our spiritual lens got mucked up somewhere along the way, and we need a little windshield wiper fluid, sort of clean us off a little bit, and then we get to shine through again. So, I think there's goodness behind us all the time.
This is a truly wide-ranging conversation.
There's a lot of metaphor mixing happening.
This is good. It's fantastic. We got donkeys, we got chickens, we've got, and I just want to do a big shout out here to all of you for this incredible co-creation, liturgical co-creation that's going on in the chat box, which I'm just going to save. It's going to remind people that you can save the chat by clicking on the three dots in the chat box on the right when we're done, if you'd like. I think you can't do it on an iPad or a phone, but anyway, Matovu hopefully will never be the same for many of us. But I think this idea, Lydia, I think it's really, a lot of people are not quite so aware of the extent to which there's this idea, this is Jewish value or concept understanding about the inevitable fluctuations, right, in life, and the idea that there's a constant that runs throughout. If you want to put it in, you can put it so many different ways. Like God is with us in exile, right, and God is with us when we're home. It's expressed in the idea of the Shekhinah being, the feminine aspect of God being in exile with the people, or Rachel crying over the exiles, or the idea of for me, I love the concept of Yeridat Sorech Aliyah, which is basically there's every descent is for this of ascent. That there's holiness in the descent, which is another, I guess it's another way maybe of understanding what you were teaching. But what about, let's talk about Ohel and Mishkan. Okay, Ma tovu ohelecha. So Ohel then goes with Yaakov, which is the diminished, right, consciousness, and Mishkan. The distinction between, it's really good because, like you said, nothing is redundant, but they are almost synonymous, but they're not completely synonymous, right? Ohel and Mishkan are used a little bit interchangeably in Torah, and Yaakov and Israel are used interchangeably, but there's a distinction, right, between Ohel and Mishkan. What do you think?
And I loved when I started looking at it and realized that distinction spoke so deeply to me, because I love going camping. I actually find like a great sense of peace and at homeness in some ways in a tent. And so that has a beautiful connotation to it, even with its impermanence and its discomfort in some ways. But then, of course, our tradition thinks about Mishkan and as the meeting place between God and the people. Right? This becomes what will eventually be the temple. That it is sort of God's dwelling place among us. And so it was really highlighted for me, this notion of when we are feeling that maybe disconnect is not even the right word, because but yeah, I think the sense of feeling just unable to access, like the door feels a little bit closed to the practice sometimes. And that it can be a very difficult thing to experience when we're first starting, or really starting to deepen our practice, and we've had some of these moments of just like top of the mountain kind of moments. And when we might feel disappointed in ourselves, or the little judgy voice might start to roll in. We might feel nervous that we're not going to find it again, or and to just realize that it's a station along the way that is necessary in some ways. One of the great things I learned from my JS over the years, of many, is that the goal actually isn't always to live in the Mishkan. Like if we all lived in the Mishkan all the time, as Jordan once said, we could be crossing the street trying to live in the Mishkan, but the bus is coming, like we got to watch out for the bus. You can't always live in the Mishkan. Sometimes you have to live in the Ohel. So, but there's goodness there too. There's also goodness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's great. Thank you for that. I thinking also that another way that I think about it is, in relating it to mindfulness, is that that first part of the equation is that I'm just not aware. I'm not aware. I'm just not conscious of something that actually is there, and it gets represented in Jewish theological language about that God is God is there, but hidden. But really, it's not God is so much God is hidden as like I am hiding from God, right? And I can know that I'm hiding, and yet there's still a presence there. It's just in the background of my or beyond my field of awareness, and yet I know it's there. And in some ways, that is that's more precious than the heights and the moments of great connection, and we think we're seeking those moments of great connection. And I think one of the beauties of that way of looking at it is, even when we're not, even in the concealment, even when we're afraid, even when we're in hiding because we're, whatever the reason may be, because we're in pain or because we're afraid or for lots of good reasons, or because we got to, take out the trash. Even then, and that's part of, I think, also when you're referring to IJS and we're thinking about like the non-dualistic understanding of the divine that we are really, lifting up in Jewish tradition, is that idea is that there is no time or place where God is not present, even when we're not paying attention, and you're, and that presence is goodness, is tov. And so like goodness is there. Goodness is there, even when I'm furious, even when I'm like not at my best, even when I'm losing it. God is still there. God is, there's goodness still there. So thanks for stirring. For me, just going to say thank you for like waking me up a little bit to that, because I definitely could use that, and imagine others can as well. So I'm going to save this chat for myself. I want to go back and read the beautiful translations and comments, and I want to thank you, Lydia, for inspiring that, for that, that great riffing on Ma Tovu, and send your blessing right back to you, that you're, that you through, through the valleys too, will feel that presence and that goodness, and help lift you up to ever greater heights as well. Have a wonderful summer. And thank you all for being with us. And what a wonderful way to enter into Shabbat. Ma Tovu. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thanks, Adi. And hope to see you all on Monday. Be well.